Both cases involving years-long murder investigations. One, Rick DeBate, found guilty of all charges in the murder of his wife, Connie.
3 hours to find her husband, Rick DeBate, guilty of killing Connie in 2015 in their Ellington home.
The pain of Connie's loss and the length of this trial has been especially hurtful to the family.
There were more than 100 witnesses and 600 pieces of evidence presented in this trial.
I'd say we were a bit surprised. He knows we're going to be back and keep fighting, so he's ready.
Didn't expect the verdict to happen so soon. I was really skeptical, but
he faces 125 years to life in prison.
The intruder was in any of them.
I just want to ask you guys.
They told residents to gather everyone in their respective homes, get into a room, and not move until they were told to. Everyone hid, waiting for the all clear. But the news about what had happened inside the debates house would soon get far worse.
Drop a comment and tell me what city
Richard had been found far worse.
What's the weather like over there right now? All right.
Richard had
let's get
far
into
worse.
the story. And trust me,
Richard had been found tied to a chair and bleeding.
Connie Margot DeBates, who was 39 years old, lived in Ellington, Connecticut with her husband, 40-year-old Richard, and their 2 sons, Richard Jr., better known as RJ, who was 9, and 6-year-old Connor. She was originally from Rockville, and she grew up in this big, loud, super close family. And as she got older, she loved hosting parties and get-togethers even more. For Connie, nothing mattered more than friends and family gathered around good food and games. That was her happy place. Christmas, New Year's, Halloween, there seriously wasn't a single season when she wasn't planning, well, something. A lot of people will kind of drift apart after high school or college, but Connie just refused to let that happen. She constantly organized reunions so everyone stayed connected. She was full of energy, always upbeat, and her friends would say she was the first to offer advice and the first to show up when someone needed help day or night, busy or not. One summer at a party, she met Richard DeBates, a computer technician. And, some people said they wouldn't normally picture the two of them together, but they actually fit perfectly. The more people got to know Richard, the more they saw this funny, slightly kid-like side to him. Folks described him as a big kid, someone always trying to make the whole room laugh. And Connie was exactly the same way. After a while, Richard invited her to meet his parents, and his mum later said she instantly knew Connie was special. On July 4th, 2003, the couple got married and started their life together in a cozy home on a quiet suburban street, 7 Birchview Drive. Once they had Jay and Connor, Connie's famous parties became even bigger and more elaborate. She wanted the coolest decorations, the best costumes, and the wildest props to surprise her kids. At one Easter party, she told all the kids that if they scattered jelly beans in the yard and went to sleep, they'd wake up to find them all turned into candy. And while the kids were asleep, Connie walked around the yard in the dark, picking up the jelly beans and spreading candy everywhere. She was the kind of person who always went the extra mile, pouring herself into everything she did. She just loved making people smile. December 23rd, 2015, only 2 days left until Christmas. Connie and Richard's house was decorated, the presents were wrapped, and honestly, Connie was just glowing with excitement, soaking up these last few days before the holidays with her boys. She got the kids ready for school, Richard drove them, and then headed back home to change into his work clothes. Connie, meanwhile, was getting ready to go to her spin class. Around 11 in the morning, their neighbours on quiet Birchview Drive suddenly rushed to their windows and doors. All they could hear were sirens and cars speeding down the road toward the DeBates' home. Emergency responders were reacting to a triggered home alarm and a short, urgent 911 call.
911, hello?
Rumours started spreading that there'd been a break-in at house number 7. People were saying that a masked man attacked Connie and Richard and then took off running. Officers were going door to door, checking every house to make sure the attacker hadn't slipped inside somewhere. They told residents to gather everyone in the home, pick a safe room, lock themselves in, and stay there until they got the all clear. Folks were hiding out, just waiting for some kind of signal that it was safe again. But the news coming out of the DeBates' house, it kept getting darker. Richard was found tied to a chair and covered in blood. He was lying on the floor with the chair flipped on top of him. Thankfully, the paramedics were already rushing him to the hospital. He was unstable, but alive. Connie, though, they found her in the basement. She had been shot once in the back of the head and once in the stomach. Detectives were confident the attacker had already fled, so they told everyone it was safe to step outside. And when neighbours finally walked out of their homes, all they saw was this sea of yellow crime scene tape, flashing lights, and officers everywhere. It felt unreal, like something straight out of a dark TV show. Once Richard was treated at the hospital, the nurses told detectives they could talk to him. He was shaken and totally out of it, but he still walked them through everything he remembered from that morning. He said that at 8 o'clock he left the house to take the kids to school, and around 8:30 he came back home to grab a work shirt. He saw Connie changing into her workout clothes and pulling the car out of the driveway. She was heading to a spin class at the local YMCA, but the class had been cancelled, so she ended up coming right back. Richard had a 40-minute commute to work, but about 10 minutes after he left, he realised he'd forgotten his laptop. So he turned around that's when he got a phone alert saying their home alarm had gone off something or someone had triggered it. He emailed his boss, letting him know he'd be late because he wanted to make sure everything at home was okay. He pulled into the driveway sometime between 8:45 and 9, and when he stepped inside, he heard a noise upstairs. He walked up quietly and saw this tall man in camo clothing and a mask, rummaging through Connie's jewellery. The thief spotted him and lifted a knife, demanding cash, credit cards, and the PIN numbers. Richard said he handed over his wallet right away. The attacker's face was covered completely, but he was tall, maybe about 6'2", solid build, and had this deep voice. Richard said he reminded him of Vin Diesel. After that, he said everything felt like a blur, like it all happened way too fast. He heard Connie coming back inside, and he yelled for her to run.
I yelled to her to get out of the house. My wife didn't run. She must have ran into the basement because we have 2 guns in the house. One was in the basement in a lockbox, and one's in our closet. She ran downstairs.
Instead of running out of the house, she rushed down to the basement. Richard figured she was trying to grab a weapon, something to protect them. The man chased after Connie down the stairs, and Richard heard 2 gunshots. At 9:05, he ran down and saw his wife lying on the floor, lifeless, and the man holding one of his own rifles. Then the killer went after him, slashed his legs with a box cutter, tied him to a chair with zip ties, and burned him with a torch.
I'm sitting in the chair, I was kind of half tied up, in shock, I guess.
What do you mean half tied up?
I had one leg free and an arm free. He tied one leg, tied one arm, and he tied my neck fairly tight with tie wrap. And I got a torch to kind of just blow in his mask a little bit, and it caught on fire. He dropped a blowtorch. I was starting to scream for help. I couldn't hear a soul.
Richard said he managed to grab the torch and burn the attacker's face, and that's when the guy took off. Still tied to the chair, Richard somehow dragged himself across the floor and made it to the kitchen, where he hit the panic button connected to their home security system. After that, he made a quick call to 911. The whole story was so wild and terrifying that detectives honestly didn't even know where to start. They talked to the neighbours and to Connie and Richard's friends. The friends explained that over the last few months, the couple had been dealing with a contractor, they weren't happy with the work he'd done, on their house wasn't great, so they took him to court and ended up winning a few $1,000s. Not long after that, someone smashed the windshield of their car, and Connie was convinced it was him. She said she was so scared that even though she hated guns, they felt like they needed one for protection. Richard bought a rifle and kept it in the basement. The forensic team later confirmed that this was the gun used to kill Connie. Police quickly found the contractor. His name was Ken, and he did admit their working relationship fell apart badly. He was angry that he lost the civil case, sure, but he said he'd already gotten over it. The timing was suspicious, but did that really make him a killer? The investigators' instincts were telling them no. Ken agreed to get photographed, let them search his home and his devices, whatever they needed. He had no criminal history, and his height, build, and voice didn't match the description Richard gave. And considering how many times Ken had been inside their house, Richard probably would have recognised him even under a mask. Ken had a rock-solid alibi, so police crossed him off the suspect list. During the week after Christmas, while everyone else was getting ready for New Year, Connie's family, her friends, and the whole Ellington community were preparing to say goodbye. And nobody was surprised by the huge turnout, even in the freezing cold. Hundreds of people stood in line for almost 3 hours just to pay their respects and talk to Richard at the funeral. But when Connie's 2 closest friends, the woman who'd been in her life for the past 20 years, who'd been inside that house dozens of times and spent more holidays with the couple than they could count, finally reached Richard, they were stunned. Who are you? How do you know my wife? He asked, staring at them with this empty, distant look. They just stood there, completely thrown off. They figured it must have been the stress or shock talking, and they stepped aside. But later, they admitted to each other, it's weird, he didn't have a single mark on him. Not a bruise, not a scratch. And then, to everyone's surprise, Richard left Connie's funeral really earlier than anyone else.
You would think that they would have any sort of lead by this point, right? 2 weeks and still no arrest in the murder of a young Ellington mother. 39-year-old Connie DeBate was found dead just before Christmas.
Police responded to her Birchview Drive home after the house alarm was activated. They found her husband, Richard DeBate, injured inside the smoky home. Police later found Connie with gunshot wounds to the head and stomach. Her death ruled a homicide, but police have yet to make an arrest, and they've said there is no threat to the public. Still, the entire situation putting residents around town on edge.
Understandably, Fox 61's Katie Corrado went to Ellington today to get some answers. She joins us now with the very latest. Katie?
Audrey and Brent, this murder happened on December 23rd, and people in town tell me the more time passes without answers, the more the rumor mill seems to churn.
I mean, these guys are like family. You know, these ladies have been coming in forever.
Luann Lanzieri hears a lot of the Ellington town chatter inside her nail salon on West Road.
And there's a lot of rumors going around.
Rumors about the murder of Ellington mom Connie DeBate. And 2 weeks since the crime, there's still been no arrest.
It seems like every day someone's coming in and asking, have you heard anything else? You know, this is what we heard.
Luann says most people are confident the police will find whoever killed her childhood friend.
I grew up with her in Vernon as well when she was little. And she was always a wonderful person, so I hope they find the correct person that did this to her.
The other neighbors we talked to did not want to go on camera, but say it is scary and nerve-wracking to know there has not been an arrest. They say this is what everyone around town is talking about, and they just want an answer. But answers so far are scarce.
The detectives are working very hard. They're waiting for a lot of evidence to come back from the labs. They want all their ducks in a row before they can make a decision of what's going on.
Ellington First Selectman Lori Spielman says she's in touch with police nearly every day and has been told this was an isolated incident.
Any idea when something might be coming?
I don't know, maybe next week, but they are still waiting for some of the evidence to come back.
Over the next few days, Richard seemed oddly upbeat, according to everyone who saw him. He was going out to restaurants, grabbing drinks, hosting little get-togethers at his house, cracking jokes like nothing had happened. People kept saying that if you didn't personally know him, you'd never guess his wife had just been murdered, or that he'd supposedly survived a brutal attack. Richard wrote on Facebook that he was staying strong for his boys and thanked everyone for the support. And grief, you know, can look 100 different ways. There's no right script for it. But pretty soon, the whole town started whispering about him, about how strange he was acting. Something just felt off. Friends, family, even detectives started feeling that creeping suspicion about his version of events. Back on Birchview Drive, the investigation was dragging, and sadly, none of the neighbours had seen or heard anything. The houses were spaced far apart, so officers weren't surprised. There were no signs of forced entry, but a basement window was cracked open. Maybe that's how the killer got in. But nothing was taken, nothing was disturbed. The dogs couldn't pick up a single unfamiliar scent. In fact, the first dog kept circling back to Richard, who was lying in the ambulance. The other two couldn't find even a hint that anyone had left the house. The wallet Richard claimed had been stolen was found outside, and it looked like everything was still inside it. The rifle had 0 fingerprints on it. None from the attacker, none from Connie, none from Richard. Richard did have cuts on his legs, but the nurses described them as superficial. And the more he talked to detectives, the more he drifted from confident statements to these vague, I don't know anymore answers. He said at one point he heard Connie being shot. Then he said he saw it. Then he said he didn't hear or see anything at all. He told the first responders that the killer was still inside the house. Later, he told detectives he watched the guy walk out. He also claimed everything started before 9 in the morning and Connie was shot 5 minutes later. But the 911 call didn't happen until nearly 10:30. The very next day, literally Christmas Eve, Richard hired a lawyer, and within a week, he filed a claim to collect Connie's life insurance, $475,000, and withdrew $93,000 from an investment account that was in her name. It was starting to look like the perfect couple image. Connie and Richard was hiding a whole lot behind closed doors. Back in December of 2014, Connie had created a note on her iPhone titled, "Why I Want a Divorce." She wrote about Richard's irresponsible handling of money, said he was a bad father, and that he didn't give her any attention. Connie wrote, "He takes money from so many accounts that don't belong to him. He says he's sorry but never takes responsibility. I know nothing about his day, who he talks to, what's going on in his life besides work. I'm tired of covering for him. I'm tired of lying and pretending everything is fine when it isn't." Under the section, "Why Stay Married," she wrote, "People like him when he's in a great mood. He's fun. I still find him physically attractive. I can be myself around him, but what motive could Richard possibly have? Authorities stayed quiet publicly, but the motive was there and they'd known it since the very first hospital interview. Richard had a lover, a woman named Sarah, someone he'd known since high school. Connie knew her too. Sarah even did a reading at their wedding. Richard and Sarah had been on and off for years, but they started seeing each other again in May of 2015. A month later, Sarah found out she was pregnant and, according to her, asked Richard to leave Connie. During that first 7-hour hospital interview, Richard willingly brought up Sarah himself. He admitted he'd been intimate with her, but said it was only because Sarah wanted to have a child on her own. She supposedly asked the couple for help, telling them she wanted a baby but couldn't afford it, and asked if Richard would be a sperm donor.
We were going to donate sperm to her to have a kid.
Because the medical procedure was so expensive, they decided to do it, as Richard put it, the traditional way.
Untraditional, but traditional in the way that the baby was conceived?
Yeah.
The detectives asked him, "So, did Connie know you were trying to get Sarah pregnant?" "Yes," he said. "Connie wasn't just aware she signed all the paperwork. It was her idea."
Do you think your wife had any issues with that?
It was her idea, in a way.
The detectives had a really hard time believing that, especially after they found out Richard had been telling friends he accidentally got Sarah pregnant. Richard's second version of the story went like this. Supposedly Connie couldn't have another child, but really wanted one. So Sarah offered to carry a baby for them, and the three of them would raise the child together. After detectives gave him those confused "Are you serious right now?" looks, Richard had to shift his story yet again, and finally admitted the pregnancy was accidental, and the affair had been going on for about a month.
Getting pregnant unexpected.
It was unexpected.
Richard posted a $1 million bond and was released while awaiting trial. During that time, he continued co-parenting the child he'd had with Sarah. Then in 2019, another tragedy hit the family. Connie's father passed away. He had been sick for a long time, but he was determined to stay alive long enough to see justice for his daughter. Connie's brother said their father's body just couldn't take it anymore. He died without ever seeing his child's killer behind bars. Richard's trial was originally scheduled for April of 2020, but right after the jury was selected, the pandemic and the sudden death of Richard's attorney brought everything to a complete stop. Finally, in April of 2022, the trial began. More than 6 years had passed since the day Connie was murdered.
Arrested, charged with murdering his wife more than a year ago.
Connie DeBate, an Ellington mother of two, brutally murdered in her home 2 days before Christmas. Well, tonight, finally, a break in that case. A newly released 50-page arrest warrant revealing what was happening inside that home, inside that marriage.
Yeah, we also have this exclusive video showing Mr. DeBate being transported by state police tonight.
Richard was arrested and charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and giving false statements to the police.
Grant says DeBate is being held under a $1 million bond and is scheduled to appear in court on Monday. State police say the investigation turned over every stone.
It's very important to follow all leads, follow all evidence, speak to all witnesses, any potential suspects. This is about the victim.
Grant says the lengthy investigation was a collaborative effort from several factions of law enforcement. She claims it was necessary to be extremely thorough during the process in order to prevent possible mistrials in the future. Community members reacting to the arrest of Rick DeBate right in their own backyard.
Anytime somebody loses their life is unfortunate, especially when it's domestic.
Friday afternoon, neighbors say 40-year-old DeBate was pulling onto the family street when he was served an arrest warrant for the murder of his wife, Connie. And now community members feel justice is on the horizon.
They wouldn't bring the case up if they didn't really have a lot of evidence that it was the husband.
Evidence that took nearly a year and a half to gather. Community members say the lengthy investigation is a positive.
Nowadays, the police, they got to cross every T and dot every I before they can come after you, really, or they can blow the whole case. A good lawyer will get them off.
Fortunately, you have a murderer running around the streets if it's supposed to be him, but the good side about that means they did a thorough investigation. So hopefully, like I said, justice be served.
Still, people in town are still shaken by the crime.
It's kind of a dangerous world, rough world, dangerous country. Well, you got to watch your back.
Now, we reached out to DeBate's attorney tonight, and he just sent us this statement, which reads, "My client is innocent of these charges, and he looks forward to be vindicated after trial."
He started lying to Connie, telling her he was stuck late at work or hanging out with friends. Meanwhile, he was messaging Sarah, saying he loved her and was planning to file for divorce. When Connie was killed, Sarah was only 8 weeks away from giving birth to their daughter. Richard had even taken Connie on a romantic trip to Vermont, and when she posted photos on Facebook, Sarah saw them and realised he'd been lying about leaving his wife. Whether Connie knew about the affair or the baby is still unknown, but her friends say that if she had suspected anything, she would have told someone. Whatever the truth was, it looked like Richard had decided to remove Connie from his life to start over, and in his mind, solve all the problems he had created for himself. In June of 2015, Richard actually met with a divorce attorney, but he never filed the paperwork. His phone showed that 2 days before the murder, he texted Sarah saying he was going to leave Connie, and the next day, he messaged her saying he loved her and would see her tomorrow. Connie's phone also revealed a fight between them on the same day. "You lied to me, and I'm cleaning up your crap again. Wonderful weekend and Merry Christmas." Richard replied, "It's going to be a very Merry Christmas for me too." And it didn't stop there. Richard had been paying for flowers for Sarah, booking hotel rooms, blowing more than $1,000 at a strip club, all using a secret credit card. He had also been searching online for things like deadly over-the-counter combinations, fast, untraceable homemade poison, tasteless poison easily available. And if all that wasn't enough, there was still a huge amount of evidence waiting to be pieced together. Christmas of 2016 came and went, then New Year's, and finally spring of 2017. Connie, who had always been active, used her Fitbit daily, and the day she died was no exception. The Fitbit data showed a timeline very different from the one Richard described. Police already knew he waited more than an hour before calling 911, maybe because of shock. But the Fitbit data, security system logs, computer records, and cameras created a precise picture of the morning. Here's what it showed. 8:26 to 8:27 a.m. Richard was on Facebook on his computer. During this time, he claimed he was driving to work. 8:41 a.m. a login to Outlook.com from his computer. 8:45 to 9 o'clock a.m. According to him, he supposedly came home, met the intruder, and saw Connie returning, except 8:46 a.m. Connie actually left for her spin class, confirmed by Fitbit. A minute later, Richard attempted to disable the home alarm. 8:50, he successfully turned it off, then turned it back on 9 minutes later. 8:53, Connie entered the gym. A few minutes later, she messaged her therapist. 9:04, Richard emailed his boss. He claimed he sent it from the car, but the email came from the home IP address. 9:08, Connie walked out of the gym and got into her car. 10 minutes later, Richard was browsing the YMCA website, the same place she'd gone. 9:23, Connie's Fitbit detected movement when the garage door opened. 9:40 to 9:46, she was on Facebook. It looked like around this time, Richard was trying to figure out how to get her into the basement. 10:05, Connie's Fitbit recorded its final movements. 10:12, the alarm system's panic button was pressed using Richard's remote. The data showed that Connie was alive for nearly an hour after Richard claimed she had died. None of his statements matched the facts. He hadn't left the house. His timeline was wrong. Her heart rate never indicated she was running from an attacker. And finally, in April of 2017,
murder trial that has gained worldwide attention.
Now, cameras are not allowed in the courtroom for this trial, but we are allowed to sit in and listen. The now former detective told jurors that Richard DeBate gave law enforcement consent to search his Ellington home, his iPhone, and also allow them to swab him for DNA and gunshot residue. The state presented other evidence, including photographs of Richard DeBate's injuries while he was in his hospital bed, along with clothing, his hospital socks, and a shoe that had blood on it. DeBate's attorney had this to say outside the courtroom today.
As the trial's ongoing, we would love to make comments day to day as each piece of evidence comes in, explain our defense and explain our side. But what we need to do is respect the process here.
Now, that Fitbit that we've been talking about, that hasn't been mentioned in court just yet, but I'm sure it will be brought up. Tomorrow, though, the jury is expected to listen to the rest of that 4-hour recording. We are live from Rockville. Courtney Zeller, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
There were 600 pieces of evidence presented, and more than 130 witnesses testified, including Richard himself. The defense argued the police had tunnel vision. They decided from the very beginning that Richard was guilty, and they shaped the evidence to fit their theory. But everyone knew that wasn't true. Detectives had thoroughly investigated every possible angle, including the contractor, and ruled out every other suspect. On top of that, the digital evidence, the lack of any real crime scene disturbance, the canine searches, Richard's inconsistent statements, and the affair, all of it pointed to one person, Richard. The defense tried to shift the spotlight to some unknown DNA found in the house, supposedly even on the rifle. They also claimed a cleaning lady had seen a dark figure near a window. The prosecution, on the other hand, described Richard as a ticking time bomb who had backed himself into a corner. They argued he killed Connie because a divorce would destroy his reputation, cost him friends, drain him financially, and potentially force him into a custody battle over RJ and Connor.
4 weeks into the trial, one of Connie's sisters took the stand today, saying the family learned she was shot only after a family meeting was held at their parents' home, a day after she was killed. And Richard DeBate was there. She says when he arrived at the home, she heard him say, "I didn't do it. There was someone in the house. They said I need a lawyer." She also says Richard DeBate needed help getting into the house. He looked distraught, physically ill, and it appeared he had been crying. The family gathered around the kitchen table, and she told jurors Richard DeBate told them the story about what happened. He told the family he retained a lawyer, and the lawyer told him not to talk about anything, but believed he owed them an explanation. Connie's sister and her brother-in-law, who also testified today, says Richard DeBate showed no emotion when he told the story. Connie's sister says Richard DeBate mentioned a trip the family was supposed to take after the holidays, going to Great Wolf Lodge, and that he will have to find someone to go with. 7 people who live or lived in the Ellington neighborhood at the time of the crime also testified, saying they didn't see anything out of the ordinary that day. And the judge mentioned in court today that they are hoping to conclude the state's case by the end, or by the middle, rather, of next week. There is no court tomorrow. It will pick back up on Friday.
Richard testified that yes, he had been in love with 2 women and felt completely trapped. He admitted to the affair, but insisted that didn't make him a killer. He said he missed Connie every single day and would never do something like that to his boys. Sarah testified that she never wanted to break up the DeBate family. In fact, she said she was ready to raise her daughter on her own and wouldn't even put Richard's name on the birth certificate if he chose to stay with Connie. Through tears, she explained how ashamed and heartbroken she felt about everything that had happened, but she never pressured Richard to leave his wife. Sarah said she never discussed any plan to hurt or kill Connie, and that Richard never admitted to killing her either. After 5 weeks, both sides rested their cases, and in May of 2022, he was found guilty on all counts.
On all counts, a jury has reached a verdict in the Richard DeBate murder trial.
Mark and Aaron, a lot of surprise here at the courthouse. The jury probably deliberated for at the most 3 hours. Richard and Connie's families had emotional reactions as the verdict was read.
Connie was essentially sentenced to death, while this convicted murderer has been living his life while out on parole for 6.5 years. There will be no closure for the Margata family, but there is finally justice for Connie.
She was a terrific sister, mother, daughter. I loved her. I remember when she was born, I'm 10 years older, my father brought me to the hospital to see her for the first time, and the nurse held her up to the window. And that was very memorable, seeing the new baby for the first time.
Richard's defense team said they're prepared to keep fighting for their client.
They only started about 24 hours ago, and it was a 5-week trial, so I'd say we were a bit surprised. I think all 3 of us very disappointed with the outcome. It's been a lot of effort, an exhaustive case, but again, we're going to have more filings. We'll say more on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent.
First up right now at 4, we start with some breaking news this afternoon. The man convicted in the Fitbit murder.
Richard DeBate was sentenced to 65 years in prison. The judge called his crime brutal, planned, and impossible to comprehend. His maximum release date is May of 2087. Before deputies led him out of the courtroom, he said, "I stand before you as an innocent man. I will never stop fighting for justice for my wife Connie, who I think about every single day." His parents still believe him, and they say they can't imagine that just 2 days before Christmas, he could lure his wife downstairs, kill her, stage everything, and then keep living as if nothing had happened. In October of 2024, Richard filed an appeal.
October 2024, Richard appealed against his conviction.
Defense attorney for Richard DeBate, Trent Lalima, addressing 6 justices in a room full of UConn law students, claiming the state prosecutor, Matthew Gdansky, engaged in a pattern of impropriety that denied DeBate a fair trial.
Perhaps some of the most damaging would be the ticking time bomb question, which was 24 hours, almost exactly 24 hours. After that, those notes had been excluded by the trial court. The state asked, "Did you feel like a ticking time bomb?" Ticking time bomb makes my client out to be a dangerous person.
I don't think that there is anything improper at all about using the defendant's own words in a prior inconsistent statement to impeach his testimony once he testifies.
Isn't this supposed to be a fair trial, not a gamesmanship?
At the time of recording this episode, the case is still under review by the Connecticut Supreme Court. In so many cases we cover, people somehow convince themselves that murder is the only way out. It feels logical to them in the moment, and the sheer amount of pain they cause to people, to kids, to parents, to friends, they just can't comprehend it. Connie's sister, Leslie, is now raising Connie's boys who spent years terrified because of Richard's lies, believing a stranger might break into their home at any moment. Only now are they beginning to accept what their father did to their mother. Connie's mother always remembers their final phone call. She remembers the very first words Connie said, "Mum, I love you. You're my best friend." And that really was Connie. She was kind, caring, the kind of person who wanted everyone around her to feel important and special. Her best friend Kim said, "I miss her laugh. I miss the way she made me feel. I miss how fun she was, how much life she brought to me and to everyone else. I miss everything, every little thing."